Hey, how's everybody doing? This is Bob Gomes with the Concerned Forum, and it is a very late night, early morning in Uganda. And I just want to say that for you folks looking at this, um, please give me a little check mark if you appreciate what I'm trying to do. And if you have any commentary, either pro or con, please feel free. Let me know what you think about what I'm talking about. Let me start off with something. I came across it earlier in the evening. Um, I mean, oh my goodness, it's 4 o'clock in the morning. But I meant to say I came across it last night. But it's something that I think it really stands fast in terms of what's going on now in America. Short thing says those who give up liberty for safety deserve neither liberty or safety. Very interesting. Written by a guy named Ben Franklin. I think it kind of encapsulates where we are at today in America with the type of regime that we have in control right now. I guess another way of saying this, what's more important, the idea of transgender women playing in sports or our Constitution that we've had for almost about 250 years? What do you think is more important? Keeping in mind that I think transgender people were about 1% of the population. Do you think that that's worth destroying constitutional government? Tell me. I want to know. Give me your comments. I'm curious about that. Um, I'm curious just how strongly do Americans feel about their constitutional liberties? Moving on to another subject, I know we're all on the big flap about the shutdown. I see, unfortunately, the head of the Federal Workers Union, which I used to be a member of, um, they're all hot and bothered in trying to appeal to the Democrats. Frankly, I think that they would be, I believe it's a gentleman. I believe that he would be better off trying to speak to the Republicans about why they are basically trying to get rid of so many federal employees. Because the sad truth of the matter is that this whole thing about, thousands upon thousands of federal employees being basically kicked out the door, this has nothing to do with the shutdown. And that the Republican Party is just using this as an excuse. And you're being played, Mr. Union Man. You are being played because you are running to the Democrats, basically crying on their shoulders, and the Democrats are not responsible for this. And I would ask you, um, Mr. Union Man, do you think that Americans should have to pay? In some cases, some people have to pay 1,000, close to $2,000, especially people with families, for health insurance. And I'm glad to see that this is the rock that the Democrats have chosen to fight on. There's a couple of other rocks that they need to, fight on, but this is a good one. This is a very good one. Now, you ever notice that things like health insurance, uh, feeding kids in school, things of that nature. Ever notice that Republicans always, they flap around talking about, oh, waste, fraud, and abuse. But when it comes to Elon Musk walking into the White House having his hand out, his palm gets greased like that for, maybe a few $1 billion. But that's okay. We're not supposed to notice that sort of thing, right? I think that that's one of the problems, especially when you're talking about working class people in this country. Too many of us have an inferiority complex in America. Working class people have an inferiority complex because instead of questioning, hey, why do you think you should be able to end SNAP benefits or basically not do a damn thing about health care, and yet you feel quite comfortable giving billions to corporations as subsidies. Uh, Working class people need to stand up and yell and say, hell no. But it's like the Republicans have us trained, okay, not to fight in our own interest. And I tell you quite frankly, that's something that definitely needs to stop. Now, I also noticed that, hey, Argentina got $40 billion. Trump is doing his devastation on the East Wing, which I guess what now, 350 million. And meanwhile, over 40 million Americans are going hungry in November. And I don't understand that, quite frankly. I'm proud of the over 7 million people that came out for No King's Day. Frankly, it should have been at least 50 million. That's the way I look at it, quite frankly. Now, Senator Ron Johnson, the bigot from Wisconsin. Now, he magnanimously offers a proposal to pay federal workers during the shutdown. And what is this? Essential workers? For what the hell is an essential worker? The way I look at it, I worked for the federal government for 5 years. Everybody plays a role. Everyone plays a part. Everyone deserves a paycheck for the work that they do. Everyone deserves the opportunity to feed their damn family. And the craziest thing, some furloughed people or people who work but are not getting paid, and there was even a question about them not getting paid. Have we gone insane in this country? Have we all gone MAGA Republican? MAGA madness? I mean, what the hell? What? I almost let an F bomb slip out. Forgive me. But what the hell has happened to us? Why do we allow these people to get away with this bullshit? I don't. I really. I have a hard time understanding it. I don't know. Maybe I'm getting older. And we have people like Bill Maher discussing crime. I mean, you have a president. See, this is what really freaks me out. You got a president, right? This guy is a convicted criminal, a convicted sexual abuser, and he wants to talk about sending troops everywhere because of crime. Listen, uh, one thing, if you're going to preach about something, don't be a perpetrator. You're not going to sit up and talk to me about crime when you yourself are a criminal. Which, by the way, we're wondering how the hell you got in there in January and you and your family have so far made over 3 billion bucks. You're running all around the Middle East making money. And it's like nobody says a word about that. And folks, I think we need to really make up our mind. All those fancy words that we talk about, democracy, land of the free, home of the brave, the people rule. I mean, all that stuff they taught us in school, was it bullshit or do we really mean it? It's just that simple. I don't know how many times I took the oath to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And I look and I see our greatest enemy is not Venezuela. Tell you the truth, it's not even Russia. It's sitting right there in Washington, D.C., with a MAGA Republican president and a MAGA Republican Congress. And I don't know, maybe I'm just, I plead guilty to being a misfit because apparently not enough people see it. Um, Another point I wanted to make, this business about a third term. Why would you allow a visibly demented, uh, convicted criminal, sexual abuser, uh, possibly a a person running cover for sexual trafficking of young underage women? Why would you allow someone like that to even think about the possibility of a third term? I mean, I'm not trying to get into personalities, but damn, man. I mean, I've been checking this guy out since I was about 13, and he looks like death walking. Um, we all have our time. We're all gonna have our time. One day the parade will be over for all of us. Okay, until in Star Trek days, medical science comes up with something new. But for the meantime, we all gonna leave here sooner or later. But when I look at Trump, I see that gnarled face. All I see is hate, quite frankly, and contempt for every other human being that he thinks is lesser than him. So why in the hell would you try and push someone like that for a third term? Unless, of course, you have some type of ulterior motive. I guess that's where Mr. Steve Bannon comes in. I have very little regard for him because I believe that he's a traitor to the uniform that he once wore. And that's the one that keeps pushing this third term bullshit. The Supreme Court says quite clearly, I mean, I don't have a PhD, but I can read, and it says two terms. And what's curious to me is why would you want to push someone like that for a third term? Which really shows me that the Republican Party is bankrupt, at least definitely morally, in terms of trying to find somebody to run for chief executive. The thing about the Republican Party that's so sad is that the only thing that they've had over the last few decades is cultural resentment, or the cultural wars, as they call, right? Which is just a concoction of bigotry, gender hatred, homophobia, and now dealing with trans issues, and that's really all it is. Also, we don't want to teach American history the way it really happened. And really, what the hell else do the Republicans have? They spent the last 20, 25, 30 years, uh, has it been? No, actually, starting in the 80s now that I think about it, late 70s going to the 80s. They spun the tale about the welfare queens. And it was always some black woman with 10 kids, and she was the welfare queen, having to go pick up her groceries in her Cadillac. Remember that? Now they're shocked and bewildered because of the fact that the majority of the people who have to get food assistance and was it EBT and what have you are Caucasian. Don't get me wrong. I mean, white Americans, working class white Americans that get these programs, they need these programs. It's just funny how the Republican Party, since the mid to late 70s, how they managed to shape things. Really starting with Nixon. right? The war on drugs turned out to be a war on black people, right? Meanwhile, you got plenty of white kids out there getting high, and that could have used help. But the whole thing was set up to be, oh, well, we got to deal with those black folks. And so while they were busy locking up, going through the whole black community, locking up young black men, a lot of white kids suffered, right? Now that the problem is so obvious, now they're talking about compassion and help and what have you. The bad thing is that, just like with the whole mental health issue, now the Republicans, what they're doing, what are they doing? They're cutting funding for all the health programs. So, you really got to ask yourself, right? When Republicans have the audacity to show their faces in public and they talk about the American people, who in the hell are they talking about? Seriously. I mean, you got the thing set up for uh, weather warning. I know I'm not using the correct terms, but you know what I mean. Weather warning, right? Hey, here comes a hurricane. Here comes a tornado. How the hell could you cut people off from that? How can you fire federal employees that handle that? How do you fire federal employees that are involved in childhood cancer research? I don't get that. I really don't. How in the hell, in the 21st century world, where everything is now so competitive, okay, America is dealing with, I mean, countries. I've been around the world, and I haven't heard of some of these places, and we're in competition with them. And maybe Republicans say, hey, let's close down the Department of Education. How do you know, I don't get that. I really don't. I need somebody to explain that to me. And then you talk about taking away food stamps at a time when jobs are getting scarcer and scarcer, especially because of AI. And I guess you want people to go hungry. And as far as I can recall, Republicans have been screaming since what, 2016, 2015? Over the last 10 years about a Republican health care plan. Have you seen it yet? I mean, they denounced Obamacare. They went throughout the white working class, pulling that culture war crap, telling them to denounce Obamacare. But the funny thing is, like for example, what was that guy from Mansion who really didn't want to support Obama? Wonder why? But those coal miners in West Virginia, the ones that get the black lung, the only guy that did a damn thing for those people since FDR was Obama. 35-year-old guys puking their guts out because of that black lung, that coal dust. So, it really makes me wonder if we as a nation will ever get over this culture crap. My opinion, we will not have sound domestic policy in the United States until we bring the culture wars to an end. There's just no two ways about it. Because you look at a demagogue like Trump, and quite frankly, the only way that he was ever able to get in the White House was by demagogue and cultural issues, right? Which are bullshit. We know that, you know, because it tells people vote for who or what you don't like instead of trying to get people to vote for things that are for them. See, and that's what's really that's a Republican invention. Okay, and all these clowns have done for the last 25 years has brought us nothing but what war and death, and have really dirtied the American brand across the planet. Now I'm living overseas right now. I've been here since June, here in Africa, and I will tell you that's talk to Brits, talk to Germans, talk to Asians. That's the general consensus, and quite frankly, they're right. And this is a whole Republican thing. I tell you something. I read earlier. Um, a bunch of American corporate types go to China, and you know what? They get freaked out. I mean, really bummed out. Why? Because they find that China is so technologically so much further ahead. Their population has got it together. Their technology is like tight. And they're realizing that, America, we might have a big navy, right? But we are so far behind. And the sad thing is, I remember when Bush, oh God, he really, who was that? Bush, yeah, Bush Senior. He made these big, huge overtures to China. And now I got to be honest, the the elites in both parties. They went, like we say in the Navy, they went balls to the walls in helping China to develop. The problem is that they totally forgot the working class here in America. And that's probably the main reason why we have the problems that we have now and why it's so easy for an idiot. And trust me, Donald Trump is an idiot. Okay. You talk to people from my part of the country, they'll tell you, right? We know the guy, right? We know the family, we know the guy, okay? And with one or two exceptions, but that's essentially what happened. You know, it's not it's not about being anti-globalism. Shit, what since what the 1300s, the world was going global, right? The fact that I'm a African man born and raised in America, that's about globalism. Ever hear of the triangular trade? We'll talk about that one of these days. But it's not so much the globalism, but what our elites did and didn't do for American workers here in the United States. And I, the thing that really ticks me off, okay, and this is where I get back on the Republicans' case, is because instead of them working to better the conditions to give American workers a chance, instead of giving them training for jobs, right? Some kind of economic lifeline. The only thing that they fed the working class, and I will say it, the white working class in the United States, was culture wars. Yeah, abortion, gays, um, DEI, right? Uh, uh, DEI is a relatively new term. Before it was that damn affirmative action. This is the kind of crap that they threw out to working class white America. Didn't say about, yeah, well, we need to do what we did in the 60s. What did they do in the 60s? And not that, how should I say? Well, put it this way. what they did because of the competition between us and the Soviet Union, math and science, right? They said, yeah, we need federal funds to go so we can get in there so we can have trained teachers, trained scientists, trained astrophysicists. The economy took a giant leap forward, and that was a good thing. But then when we get into the late 70s, going into the Reagan administration, we started walking backwards. And unfortunately, we've been walking backwards ever since. Even during the time of the Clinton administration, um, I'm not saying that the Clinton times were totally bad, but the Democratic Party under Bill Clinton, and it stayed like that, uh, basically tried to mold themselves upon the Republican Party. That's why a lot of working class people have a bad taste in their mouth about Democrats. Uh, because they say, well, what the hell? You're not going to go out there and fight. Why should I hang out with you? Now, I'm glad that the Democratic Party is working to basically start showing that they have some type of, uh, testicular enthusiasm, shall we say, but they still have some ways to go. But I would say that this whole situation uh, that has accumulated over the last, what, 30 years or so, this is a Republican mess. Okay? Think about the trillions of dollars that we have spent uh, in these stupid wars. Okay? Think about all the aid that we have given to Israel to slaughter Palestinians. And then you look around and your schools are crap, right? We don't have any health care. Uh, woman is going to have a baby. There's no kind of maternity leave worth talking about unless she is really in a has a very, very good position. Um, and it's madness. It's like now they're attacking New Yorkers because it seems that majority of New Yorkers prefer Mondani, right? Who happens to be a democratic socialist. The sad thing is that most Americans don't know the difference from a democratic socialist to a communist uh, to a market capitalist. They just react almost like Pavlov's dog, right? And I'll let you look that up. But they react, quite frankly, to what they have been more or less trained to react to. But I tell you, a perfect mark against capitalism, against market-based capitalism, is what's happening now in the White House. It's a fire sale for billionaires, right? I know ranchers and farmers would much rather do what they do. Unfortunately, because of Trump's tariff tariff wars, their economy is so screwed up that they're basically asking for a handout, which, by the way, is a socialist way of handling problems. So, what are you saying? That socialism is good for thee, but not for me? I mean, billionaires, they're beneficiaries of socialism every damn day. But that woman who's got them 3 kids, she doesn't qualify for that kind of gratuity, I guess, right? See, I guess what I'm saying, it's not. I mean, don't get me wrong. Trump and MAGA are monsters, okay? But what they are, They are basically symptoms of a problem that we've been ducking and dodging for like the last 25, 30 years. And there has to be a reckoning in America. People have to understand that if you want to have a functioning, intelligent, competent democracy, there are things that we're going to have to do. You know, it's just that simple, right? If you want to be a great basketball player or baseball player, certain things that you have to do. And it doesn't change because we're talking about government, the government that we live under. Certain things that you have to know, certain things that you have to take responsibility. And we haven't been doing that, right? How many people out there took civics or even remember civics, right? What did they do? They changed it into some kind of watered down bullshit social studies? No. And especially in the red states, you got these clowns walking about. No, we can't teach that history. No, you can't read that book. And that's, that's not good because if people don't know how they got there, then how in the hell are they going to know where they're going? I mean, it's just, to me, it just stands to reason. And every time I see what Trump has done to that East Wing, it makes you want to throw up, quite frankly. It bothers me in particular because I used to have to go in the White House all the time when I was assigned to DIA, and I had two spots. I had the basement, right, where all the real stuff happens. Um, national intel stuff. I used to see that, what's his name, Chuck Weinberg, like about 3 times a week, and the kitchen, right? Because I was cool with one of they always have Navy cooks, and I was cool with one of the cooks, and I ate well, and to see what this so-called president is doing to the East Wing, it kind of hurts. You know, it kind of hurts. What hurts more is the fact that he's up there showing his plans. His what's now 350 million, which I thought was supposed to be only 200 million. Now it's 350 million, and you're going to have over 40 million people being hungry in November. And I don't. I'm just trying to figure out how Americans stand for that. You know, what happened to us as a people that we accept that we accept this kind of insults. And then I look at something else that really worries me. I look at the deteriorating, um, mentally incontinent president trying to kill everybody in South America and the Caribbean, quite frankly. And I see that his Secretary of Defense, and I'll be damned if I call him Secretary of War. When Congress decides to change the name, that's when I'll call it the Department of the War Department, right? But and I've said this before, and I'll keep saying it. I get the impression that Trump and MAGA and its MAGA Republican Party, because of all the ICE raids into American cities, uh, I get this distinct feeling that they're trying to weaponize the American military, the military that we paid for, the military that a lot of us have served in. They're trying to take that military and weaponize it against the American people. And I think that that's dangerous. I get the impression, especially with this guy, this Fox newscaster, or Fox TV host, whatever you want to call him, Exit, right? Who Trump decided to make Secretary of Defense. It never occurred to anybody. And this is another problem I have with Democrats, okay? Those guys in the Senate that voted to approve this guy becoming Secretary of Defense. You know, see, we Democrats, we have crap in our hands also. Okay, with some of the choices that we made, people like Fetterman, people like that. See, and we made some huge mistakes as a party, and we have to really bust our ass to work about correcting them. Okay, because under Trump and MAGA Republicans' guidance, basically, he's trying to turn the military into a force of just white Anglo-Saxon Protestant males. Okay, if a gal is lucky enough to be in the military, she's just going to be a handmaid and definitely not a fighter pilot. I mean, that is their mentality. That's what they are trying to do, right? Tell me how many Latinos, how many African Americans or Asians, right, in senior command posts have they gotten rid of? From what I understand, quite a few, right? These are men and women. They know the deal. They know their jobs, right? Uh, if you are a parent and you have a kid in the military, these are the people that you know that you want your kid to be under their command. And Harrison just got rid of him. And then he calls the senior people from around the world to come to a meeting where he tells them, I don't want you to be fat and I want you to be killers. Well, listen, the military I was a part of, we understood that our bottom line, when necessary, is to no matter what branch of the service or what your job was, you were basically there to help kill the enemy. We understand that. But we didn't see ourselves as killers. We saw ourselves as defenders, hence Department of Defense, right? And it would seem that Trump, who as usual lies about every damn thing, when he lied about saying that he would not put America into a whole bunch of wars, and they seem to want to do the exact opposite. Personally, I think what they're trying to do, they're trying to turn America into a certain kind of place, and they want to try and dominate Latin America, and slowly but surely try to dominate the African continent. They have to because of the fact that Africa has most of the world's mineral wealth. Okay, so I would warn Americans that if we persist in electing MAGA type people, okay, strap on your seatbelts because it's going to be a rough road, right? Starvation at home in America and constant war eventually. What do you think a third term would be about? Right? Why is this whole thing about they're trying to gear up now to give him a third term? What we really need to do, what Democrats really need to do, is really start keep your eye on Trump, but and more importantly, keep your eye on who's behind Trump. Okay, what is that? The lawyers. What's that term them lawyers use? Latin bene bono. I know I'm probably saying it wrong. I've forgotten most of my altar boy Latin, but what is it? Bene bono? Who benefits? right? And especially when you are dealing in a situation, you always have to ask yourself, who benefits, right? Everyone knows that Trump is basically, he's like a shell, okay? I mean, he looks like the walking death every time you see him, right? But who's pulling his strings, right? Who benefits? We're killing people like crazy off the coast of Venezuela, right? Who's benefiting from that? Why? Why is he talking about putting troops into Venezuela? We don't have any cause for that. And any damn fool off the street knows that Venezuela is not a source of fentanyl. So why? What's going on with that? See, this is the thing about the American people. They keep us so misdirected. Okay. You're worrying about the job. You're worrying about trying to find a job. You're worrying about trying to pay your rent. You're living in your car. You're living in a shelter. You're living in a tent. I mean, all kinds of shit going on. You go into the supermarket and you feel like you've been raped. Okay? And it's hard to sometimes just sit down and think about stuff, you know? But the things that you need to think about, they are important, right? Because the people that you think about are the ones that will guide your future, your destiny, your kids' future, right? And this whole thing, it's a coordinated plan to break the American people down, to break you down, okay? Like in boot camp, right? They break you down and build you back up. Only in this case, they're going to break the American people down. They're not going to build you back up. And just like all them farmers out there, right? They're going to lose their land, and Trump and his friends are going to buy up the land. And if the farmers are lucky, they'll get a job as maybe a foreman on their own land, right? Why do you think they're building all these concentration camps? That's what they are, detention centers. Well, hell, if you claim that people don't belong in the country, then just ship them the hell out. But that's not what it is. That's not what it is. I mean, there are a couple of scenarios that people are discussing. The bottom line is that the things that they have cooked up, or I should say, cooking up for the mass majority of American working people, hey, it don't mean us no good. All right. And we need to be realistic about this. You don't take away everything that the American people have depended on for the last 75, 80 years. And then talk about how you love America and how you love the working class. Don't hand me that bullshit. And I'm talking slow on this one because I don't want it to be I don't want to be misunderstood. But white working class people, right, have been played so badly by the Republican people. When I say played, I mean like somebody made a sucker out of you, made a chump out of you. Okay, as we say in the hood, you know, white working class people have been played. Okay, because these folks, these Republicans, I'm not saying all. I'm not going to say all corporate folks. Okay, I think like for example, Mark Cuban. I think he's a cool dude. I really do. But you have a lot of bad, super wealthy actors. Okay, just like the kind of people that was tied up with Epstein, right? And they do not mean the mass majority of American workers any damn good. That's just the way it is. And they get people like Trump, who already has a whole suitcase full of character flaws, and they put him in a position where he's able to demagogue these cultural issues, right? Because, well, you got to offer people something. If you can't offer them bread, then you got to offer them hate, and that's what's been going on for the last, since the late early '80s, quite frankly. Um, I don't think that Reagan was a specifically evil man. Because I remember when I was at the White House and the Pentagon, he managed to keep some of the worst of abusers, the worst what we call now MAGA type people. He managed to keep them in the basement, more or less. Um, Bush Senior also had the ability to keep most of the folks in the basement. Um, George Jr. That's when they started, you coming up from underneath the rocks. And I think that George Jr. I think he regrets a lot of the moves that he made. But that's my truth. But that's how it happened. I know because I was there. I was there when I came in the Navy. Jimmy Carter was president. Okay. And I wound up at the White House basically at the beginning of the Reagan Revolution. And I saw the whole thing unfold itself. And I'm sorry to say, even my mom and dad were part of the Reagan Revolution. They were Republicans, you know. But my mom, I have to give her credit because after a certain time period had passed, more and more she kind of pulled away from the Republican Party. But the reason for that is because remember, my father was from the islands, right? American Virgin Islands, but still the islands, and the Dominican father and everything like that. And that's another weakness that we in the progressive side have. And you saw that in this last election, where so many Latino people, they actually trusted in Donald Trump. And see, my mom, she saw the direction that the Republicans were going in, right? We had friends who were Republicans. This is when they were still living in New York, that told them, you basically the Republican Party was being taken over by Southerners who ran away from the Democratic Party because of civil rights. And you really started to see that right at the beginning of the whole Reagan thing. And so after a few years, she kind of cooled out with that. And eventually, my dad, he finally realized what was happening. And so he kind of did like a Colin Powell. Colin, he's kind of, he saw what was happening. And that's how he wound up supporting Obama, see. Um, and that's basically what the Republican Party, what they work on, hate, anger, grievance, the cultural wars, right? And I think that white working class people did themselves a disservice, uh, basically falling for the Republican lines about the culture wars. Because one thing you have to say about Democrats, you might not like it, but they will. They, they'll face it. They find the problem and they'll make a program, right? And I know that sometimes that's kind of clumsy, right? And maybe a little expensive, but it does good. Training people, helping people to understand that there's a new world coming, and that American workers, we have to be ready for it. We have to train our workers. We have to train and educate our kids. Say, and the Republicans, they were never about that. right? They were about getting tax cuts, giving it to wealthy people, and screw everybody else. But instead of telling white working class people, listen, we ain't gonna help you, right? But what they'll do, they'll come and tell them, "Hey, look at that trans person that wants to use a bathroom, right? Or look at that affirmative action or DEI program." Not stopping to point out that the main people that benefited from affirmative action and DEI were white, white females. See, and see, this is the game that the Republicans have played on the white working class. And that's why you look at the sorry shape that the country is in. I put that right on. I don't go for this in most cases. I don't go for this. Well, if both parties are no, hell no. For the basic problems in our country over the last 40 years, it's the Republican Party. Okay, period. I lived through. Okay, and that's what they do. They don't really build anything. The only thing they create is animosity. And if somebody wants to debate that with me, I'll be more than happy to do so. But it's true. Look at the young Republicans, right? Look at that. Look what they've done. I like Hitler. One of those guys that was in on those chat meetings, right? He was already an elected official. I think was he a state senator or some shit. Yeah. That's about I love Hitler, right? Uh, talking about Jews and gas chambers. What kind of crap is that? And giving the impression that a woman should enjoy being raped. And they're supposed to be the future of the Republican Party. We're not talking about 15-year-olds here. We're talking about grown ass people. In this case, grown ass men, right? Because a young Republican is anybody from 18 to what, 40? So you're not talking about little cute toddlers and thumbsuckers, right? And this is what the Republican Party holds for the future. But then what do you expect? Because this is the garbage that they have been accepting for the last 30 years and pushing out, and pushing out to the people. Remember Lee Atwater? We're going to find ways for you to stomp down on black civil rights, but how not to say nigger while you're doing it. That's almost verbatim what Lee Atwater told Republicans beginning in the late 60s and early 70s, right? And he was so effective at it that on his deathbed, because he had a tragic death, he was like real young when he kicked off. But what he did do, he did apologize. I believe to what Jesse Jackson, maybe to Al Sharpton. I know he apologized to Jesse Jackson and a few other black notables. But yeah, that's that's the trail that the Republican Party, for the most part, have been on for about the last 30, 35 years. And so, really, this whole thing with Trump and MAGA, it's no surprise. But somehow we're going to have to work our way through this, and people in America, United States, are just going to have to get it together. You got these MAGA clowns basically trying to turn the military into an invading force, and the fact that you have a crack brain president talking about attacking blue states and blue cities, it's not illegal. Where the hell is where in the hell are the judges and the courts? I know, I just don't understand that. Hell, where are the Democrats in Congress? Yes, I'm glad that they're finally starting to speak up and fight, but they got to do a lot better because this is our country that we're talking about. And I'll tell you something. as we found out with the minority leader. Okay, it's not going to be about, well, if I just hold my head down and say as little as possible, this will pass over me. No, because unfortunately, what Trump and MAGA have unleashed, they have unleashed the gutter of America. They have unleashed the lynch mobs, right, that used to plague this country uh, from the days of my childhood and before, right? They have brought it up into, this now 21st century. Or am I imagining that? Did they not try to murder Nancy Pelosi and wind up cracking her husband's skull? Did they not murder the state, uh, the Speaker of the State House, and where was that? In Michigan, right? Uh, did this guy almost successfully pull a hit on Hakeem Jeffries, the minority leader? So, with Democrats and progressives, what we have to understand is that we're going to have to fight seriously because they're going to try and kill us. Look at the type of people that they hired for ICE, right? People that couldn't pass the test to go into the United States Army. But that's who they're hiring as federal officers for ICE, right? Where do you think they get people like that? Out of what trailer park? Out of what bar? Hmm? This is serious business here. This is our country that we're talking about. And what progressive and intelligent people, and both sides of the fence, okay? Because I refuse to believe that every registered Republican is a crazy, hate-filled, murderous bigot. I refuse to believe that. But decent people are going to have to step up. We are going to have to step up. And I will say this with every video I make. You're going to have to step up. All of us. And if we're not willing to do that, hey, screw it. You know, let the mega animals take over, have the country, right? And let Donald Trump use our military as his private Praetorian Guard. It's real simple. You don't have a choice. You really don't, especially you elected officials, because you are already a known entity, right? Just like Mr. Jeffries. You're a known guy. So you might as well just be progressive, okay? And just do the right thing. It's just as simple as that. Because they will try to hunt you down no matter what. And we have seen that. They tried to kidnap the governor of Michigan, for God's sake. These people are not playing. They hate America. They hate what America really stands for in the modern era. They don't like it. And they will basically kill you, just like those animals that attacked the nation's capital on January 6th. They're not playing. And we can't afford to play either. It's just that simple. We believe in law and order. We believe that laws rule, not men, but laws, right? Decided upon in public assembly by our elected officials. And Trump and MAGA Republicans, they don't believe that, okay? And they will do anything to basically crush working class people of all colors and then twist and try and make America something that it was never meant to be. Seriously. You think people that you think people that really give a shit about you would cut off your food stamps? Cut off your ability to feed yourself and your family? cut off your ability to get medical care for yourself, cut off your ability to have trained scientists search for cures to the biggest uh, medical blight that we have in the 21st century, cancer. People who care about people, they wouldn't do that. And then turn around and give 40 billion bucks to Argentina? Come on, people. You got to start using your head. I mean, you can have people like me out there running around like idiots trying to tell you the sky is falling. But if you yourself don't start sitting down and using critical thinking skills, then I don't know what to say. As a Black American, knowing the history of what my people have had to go through to be considered Americans, I would say this, that it's important to me because people fought for me to be able to walk through the streets as a man, or a woman, or what have you. And I think that that's something that I'm bound to respect. So all of us, black, white, yellow, brown, red, we have to get it together, people. And it's getting late, and I'm gonna pack it in for the night. And this is Bob Gomes with the Concerned Forum. Keep reading, keep thinking, take care of yourselves and each other, and peace.